Kingdoms rise and empires crumble, and the knowledge and wisdom from past ages are lost to the foggy ruins of time. But for genuine seekers of truth, one place stands alone on a hill. Shining brightly in the darkness, you, dear listener, have reached the Hidden Citadel.
Hey, welcome to the Hidden Citadel.
You found us.
I have pages and pages of notes for today's episode.
Actually, I cannot wait.
I have 5 pages of
That's
notes
awesome.
for today's episode. A lot of my information I've seen in a lot of different sources, but there's a guy on YouTube who has a channel called So Weird with Patrick James, and he kind of summed everything up into one really concise video. It's not super, I mean, it's almost a half hour long, but he pretty much talks about all of the weird conundrums associated with the Great Pyramid of Giza.
And that's the
And
thing.
I have
I think
pictures
we're
today.
covering a lot of, our topic today is something that everybody has been talking. Like, it's not the topic itself, I think, is not, is almost like, for most people, like, all right, we've talked about the pyramids, we know. But I think the reason why you and I are kind of attacking it is because we kind of, there's different questions that we've been asking over the past, the latest findings and that sort of thing, and just all the conversations that have been taking place. It's not like we're just trying to jump onto a topic that's threadbare that everybody's like, all right, enough.
Well, and we've been talking about this, I
Yes.
remember 20 years ago having a conversation with you and Audra about the pyramids,
Yes.
So it's like, this is something we've been interested in for quite a while.
Yeah.
The most recent news is somebody claims that they found structures underneath the pyramids.
That Italian
and
researching group.
the best video I've seen kind of laying it out is the Metatron. He's actually Italian, and he speaks like 4 or 5 languages. He's really an interesting guy, and he actually translates the press conference into English as you're watching it.
Wow.
So it's not as sensational as what some of the papers have kind of made it out, the way that the Metatron kind of translates it. So, but that's not really, there's so much other weird facts about the pyramid that we can talk about all day long without even getting into the most recent stuff.
True.
But one of the things that I keep running into is I see two. I'm not an Ancient Aliens guy, and we've debunked a lot of the Ancient Alien stuff on here. Dr. Heiser did a really good job debunking a lot of the Ancient Alien stuff, to the point that even Graham Hancock took notice.
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan. So it's like, this is... Heiser did a really good job. The one thing that I don't remember ever hearing Heiser talk about the pyramid much, but there are questions about the pyramid that Zahi Hawass surely is not addressing. And if anybody knows anything about the pyramid mysteries, they've heard the name Zahi Hawass thrown around, and he was for a while the minister of antiquities, I believe, in Egypt.
Okay.
And he's that white-haired guy that always wears the white fedora, and he's always like, oh, no, the pyramids are blah, 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 blah. And he's always like just
I don't know him.
Trashing anybody who has if you've ever watched a National Geographic pyramid show, he's the guy that they're interviewing. But everything that I've looked into Zahi Hawass, he is ruthless about crushing any of the alternative theories of Egyptology other than the standard status quo line of thinking with Egyptology. So there's his camp, which we're going to, I guess, in the show or today's episode, we'll kind of refer to that as the academic, you know, thought process on the topic. Then you have the young Earth creationists, that they have their own kind of strange stance. I don't know if you've listened to any of their stuff.
I can't wait to hear
man, we're going to get into that. So we're going to call their ideas the young Earth.
Hambone. Is that Ken Ham?
We'll call it the Hambone philosophy of the whole thing.
Bunch of amateurs.
The amateurs. They're a bunch of amateurs. I don't want to discount young Earth creationists totally. They have some halfway decent scientists that are part of like the Ark Encounter and some of this stuff. The only problem I have with young Earth creationists is there can be absolutely no ambiguity in their science. Yeah. Everything has to have an answer, and they have to have an answer for everything, and there never can be the answer, oh, I don't know, or we don't know, or we need more information on that. They have to cram all of their information in and make it fit, and I don't like that because that's not how it is. I mean, the actual way things are, we don't know a lot of stuff.
And, you know, I heard an interesting, one of my science teacher friends, physics teacher, he said science is really built on you have to start with failure, error, not knowing something. And that's how a theory becomes stronger, because you're working with the standard measure of error, trying to prevent it, trying to make more accurate. So you have to be not only humble to it, but you have to look for error, because error allows you to chisel away things and make the truth a lot more refined, give it better dimension, give it better understanding, and ultimately make it more pure.
Yeah. I want to address two things. The young Earth creationists, I believe, do an excellent job at pointing evidence that points to the reality of Noah's flood.
Yeah.
And that it was a global flood.
Yeah.
That's where they shine.
Yeah.
And they do a really good job at that.
Yeah.
Anything prior to Noah's flood falls apart using their own reasoning apparatus that they build up, because it's full of so many inconsistencies and errors and problems that if you're going to listen to young Earth creationists, follow them back to Noah's flood, and that's about it.
Yeah.
I'm not really convinced of the Noah's flood being exactly, I think they say 5,000 years ago. I'm kind of I'm not convinced of when Noah's flood was. I'm not convinced that the Younger Dryas was exactly 9,000 BC, or about 12,000 years ago. But I do think that there's probably a connection between the Younger Dryas period and Noah's flood. I don't know how to connect them completely yet in my head, but it just seems to me that though there are a lot of events that coincided with the flood of Noah that really seem to happen with the Younger Dryas, unless the Younger Dryas was the Earth was without form and void, as mentioned, and that's possible. So it could be that the Younger Dryas started everything over, and then God recreated the Earth after that, because everything got wiped out. Well, so that's a possibilty.
And that's something that you and I were, because I was watching Randall Carlson. Younger Dryas. I just get he just always sounds like he's like speaks mid congestion.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that might be a pedal for Josh Stott too. By
the way. There you go. We could throw that one in there. The Randall Carlson pedal.
Yeah, everything is mid congestion.
It's very throaty.
Very throaty. So
you hit a guitar that sounds kind of like a cocked wah.
Yeah. It's hard to do. Randall
Yeah, I know. And it just adds more distortion as you. We got to say that for the.
Yeah. The lozenge button just clears up the distortion.
That's it.
It's a true bypass. So, But I was watching him the other day, and it's so funny. He's just talking about the, the way the way the ice just annihilated kind of everything, just kept everything, whatever it was. He's talking about it, and I'm like, you know, it's still water. It covered the earth. I mean, the ice age covered the whole earth.
Exactly.
And it's like, what? It feels like there's a link there. It feels
I
like
think so.
It feels like whether you could say that the flood itself was the water that was present there. The
Well, and it
essentially
flash
just heated,
froze.
and then one of the two. It's either the flood became the glaciers became just really ice that destroyed everything and preserved, because you could preserve. It's really interesting too, because if you preserve everything in ice, or preserve something in that kind of ice, it doesn't age.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I was watching a document.
Go ahead.
I was watching a documentary about the woolly mammoths and how they were flash frozen instantly, so much so that even the food in their stomach was flash frozen.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's unprecedented. What could have caused that? And that's why I'm like, I feel like Noah's flood really fits that Younger Dryas pattern, where something so catastrophic happened that boom, everything, and it even froze things. I think the glaciers came from Noah's flood. I think the great what do you call it, the Grand Canyon came from Noah's flood.
Well,
I think a lot of things did.
What you could have, so it could coexist. You could have the flood, but the flood was not water as much as it was. I mean, obviously a flood is water, but the earth was basically very, very even and linear all the way across, and then you had canyons, you had mountains, you had volcanoes, you had elevations.
Yeah, it wasn't just water, it was tectonic activity.
It was a tectonic activity. Now, what happens if you have sudden elevations that you never had before? What are they going to do when you get to the higher part of the mountain? It's going to freeze. So what I'm wondering is, if the tectonic shift with all the explosions and where the firmament came from beneath, I mean the water came from beneath and from above, all of a sudden
it pushed Earth up,
and then there's a certain part of the Earth which was entirely because of elevation now frozen, because now it was not, and it was immediate.
Well,
when you bring all that up,
if before the flood it was Pangea, and then the tectonic activity pushed the continents to where they are, then all of a sudden now you have crazy tectonic shifting that took place after the flood. That brings me to probably my first topic about the Great Pyramid that I found interesting. The Great Pyramid is the geodesic center of the planet. And what that means is, if you were to draw, and the pyramid we know now has 8 sides. It's not just 4 sides, and you can only see the 8 sides on the morning and the evening of the equinoxes.
Wow.
But if you draw a line out from each part of the 8 sides in all 8 directions, your line will cover the most amount of land mass that you could if you did that for any other object anywhere else on Earth. You're not going to hit as much land that way. My thinking is, well, would that or the question I have is, if the pyramid was around when Pangea was around, would that still have been the same? Would that still be true or hold true? And maybe, I mean, it's possible that it did. I would like to see somebody do some research on that and let us know. But I don't believe that the pyramid, and I have pictures. So my wife actually climbed the pyramid, and I have some pictures here of her when she was on the pyramid back in, this would have been, I think, in 91. And you can't see all these pictures, but but the audience can. You can see in the pictures that some of the blocks that she is standing next to are taller than her, and my wife's almost 6 foot tall. So it's like when she's standing next to these blocks, from the bottom to the top, it's about 5 feet this way, and about 6 or 7, maybe even 8 feet this way.
Yeah.
These blocks are massive.
Yeah.
And the idea that they were moved with just hemp rope and pulleys didn't exist, so they had a hemp rope and logs. It's like, what log is dense enough and strong enough that when you put that much weight on it isn't going to crush?
Right.
I mean, I remember, this is not a big block of stone, but we moved a baby grand piano that I had out of my house, and we put it on casters. It was on a piano dolly, and we were rolling it up the back of the U-Haul ramp, and the grate on the back of the ramp, literally, because of the weight of the piano, it sanded the caster wheels completely off until it was just a flat side on the casters, and it completely ruined the dolly because the piano was so heavy, and that was just a piano.
Wow.
So it's like, but I've seen video when I was researching this of people trying to lift these blocks with cranes and move them with backhoes and things like that, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And like the cranes had steel cables that would snap while they were trying to lift up the block, and it's like, okay, well, this is where the standard thought process, the Zahi Hawass and his academic friends, where they're coming from, it's like they just can't believe that there was any other type of technology that could have existed at that time.
Yeah, I still think there's the technology theory, and the one that I'm more and more moving toward, and that's the other entity theory. And I will get into that later because
that's a good one.
There's some
So we've got our main players. Don't let me forget that. In fact, I want to make a note about that one because I didn't make a note about that. But the other entity, ENTIT. Okay. So here's some stuff. There are no inscriptions in the pyramid. Young Earth people like to say there's no water damage on the pyramids. However, that's not true. There actually are pyramids that do exhibit and show water damage, and there's also some evidence that even with the Great Pyramid, there have been repairs that were done in the far past.
Yeah.
So some people like to think that the no inscriptions thing, the only inscription ever found in the Great Pyramid was Khufu's name written in paint. And anywhere else that they found Khufu's inscription, it was chiseled in. And it's like, why would somebody just go and paint into it? And so some people theorize that actually the pyramid was damaged by water, and that Khufu actually came along and restored it. And part of the restoration process might be what you see today, with this scrabbly looking pyramid where all of the exterior blocks have been removed. If the exterior blocks had been damaged by water and Khufu removed them all back to the to what we see now, then you wouldn't find the water damage on the pyramid because it's been removed and they've used those blocks for other building projects.
Right.
So I'm thinking, that finding Khufu's name written in a pyramid doesn't convince me that he built it, and not having a lot of water damage on the pyramid doesn't convince me either that it doesn't predate Noah's flood. So, I mean, the young Earth people, they want to have it so that it lines up with the Masoretic text of the Bible, but as we've talked about many, many times, you cannot trust the Masoretic text. It was altered, and the thing that gets me is it was altered in such a way to try to convince people not to convert to Christianity. So it makes no sense to me that there are Christians out. why are there any Christians out there that are like, oh yeah, we got to stick to this, translation? And it's like, so I went recently and I bought myself it's coming in the mail. I haven't got it yet, but it's the closest Bible we have translated from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, wow.
And just
What's it
this
called?
week, it's called let me look it up here real quick. But just this week, there's been news, and of course it'll be old by the time this comes out, but there's been news about the Dead Sea Scrolls that new dating methods have shown that the book of Daniel that is contained at Qumran, or that was found at Qumran, actually dates back to the lifetime of Daniel. So it's possible that it was a direct copy of what Daniel wrote, or it's what Daniel wrote, and it's actually his handwriting.
That'd be crazy.
So this is called the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, and it's a translation by Martin Abegg Jr., Peter Flint, and Eugene Ulrich, translated, and they have the commentary. And it's the oldest known Bible translated for the first time into English, is what it says. And what I found, and what I'm wanting to check with this, is to just see how close to the Septuagint it comes. So far, everything I've read says that they pretty much line up very well. So if you're studying the Septuagint, you're going to get a pretty good understanding of the Bible. And that brings us to the dating of the pyramid. If you go by the Septuagint's dating of the pyramid, it puts it at about, let's see, Noah's flood, the young earthers date it to 2350 BC, which is, to me, ridiculous. They date the Tower of Babel to around 2150 BC, and they date Khufu's life to 2550 BC.
Okay.
And so the young earthers are like, no, Khufu couldn't have lived at 2550 BC because he had to have lived after the flood. Here's the idea, is that Egypt shows, they call it cultural continuity. There's a cultural continuity problem. Because Egypt existed way before, what the young earthers like to say is Noah's flood, and then it continued to exist after Noah's flood. Now, if you use the Septuagint dates, it pushes it back to 3998 BC, or maybe I'm reading it wrong, it might be 3798 BC, which gives you quite a bit more time, but it still doesn't fix the cultural continuity problem. And that's when the Septuagint would date Noah's flood, is 3798. But here's my thing, and I think I watched this guy, I don't know who he is, but he talked about honorific transposition in the genealogies, and he said we do it in our culture today. We say, oh, that's $100, but we put the dollar sign first. Which we really should say 100 and then put the dollar sign second. And so that's what you call an honorific transposition. So if something's more important, you stick it in the front, even though you might say it. Abraham was an example of this. Abraham was not the firstborn son, but yet he's listed first in the genealogy. And so this guy's point was not that the Bible was inaccurate, but that their way of writing dates, their way of dating things, their way of putting emphasis on things that we wouldn't put emphasis on, those are all different things that are peculiar to the way that they wrote things out. And so you can't necessarily go through the genealogies the way they're listed in either the Masoretic or the Septuagint and then say, oh, okay, I can date everything by these dates, because they leave people out. They add people into weird spots, but none of that takes away from the gospel message or the importance of the genealogies that are there. They still have important information that we're supposed to gather and garner from those, but they're not, calendars that you can sit there and put mark your calendar by. And that's why I don't exactly know how to get further back into the Younger Dryas period for Noah's flood, but to me, it's either that was Noah's flood because it's the only global thing that we have that we can point to and say, okay, this is the flood of Noah, or it was the destruction that came in Genesis 2 or 1 verse 2 when the earth became without form and void. And it's got to be one or the other, but I'm leaning more heavily on it was probably Noah's flood happened at that time. And if that's the case, then you can put the pyramid and the cultural continuity, all of that will fit right within that time period, and you can have the pyramid and the Sphinx being built way before the Sahara was there, way back into that time period, and then you can have them both have water erosion damage, which they've been shown to have, that would show that Noah's flood affected them.
How big is the Sphinx head compared to like the Mount Rushmore heads? Do you know?
I don't know, but I've been to Mount Rushmore, and that is very disappointing.
Really?
The Mount Rushmore heads are really small when you get there. It's kind of like the Statue of Liberty. In all the pictures, the Statue of Liberty looks massive, but when you actually get there, you're like, this is the Statue of Liberty? And it's the same way with Mount Rushmore. I will say this, though. The Crazy Horse Monument, I was there 30-some years ago, and it was impressive when they were just starting to work on it. Mm-hmm. You know, and they've gotten further now, and when they get finished with Crazy Horse, that thing is going to be one of the most, it should be one of the 7 wonders of the world.
Oh, that's cool.
It'll be huge. And from what I understand, the Sphinx is like that. However, the head of the Sphinx is now smaller in proportion to the body of the Sphinx, which leads a lot of people to say, well, maybe the head was originally a big lion, and then it got carved back down. Which brings me to a Bible verse. Okay, so there's a passage in Isaiah where it's in Isaiah 19 through 20, and it says, "And in that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and a pillar to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and a witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. And when they cry out to the Lord because of their oppressors, he will send them a savior and a defender, and he will rescue them." And this isn't referring to the Exodus. This is referring, because because this is Isaiah talking about something that's going to last into the future that's in Egypt, and it's an altar. And I want to look it up in the Septuagint real quick and read it to you in that. Let me find it here. Where are you, Isaiah? Oh, there he is. This is Isaiah 19. The whole passage of this, if you get a chance, is really interesting because he's talking about the Lord coming into Egypt and delivering Egypt into the hand of harsh lords and things like that. But when he gets down to it,
delivering them into what?
Into harsh labor, the Egyptians, because of their own sins.
Well,
and he'll deliver them into harsh lords and kings who will rule over them.
Okay, so that's what's really interesting because you and I have talked about this a while ago. It wasn't a part of the Hidden Citadel, but there was the Hyksos. The Hyksos, and they actually came in and subdued all of Egypt, and it's true. It's such a small, weird account because they were almost like these kind of supernatural shepherds or something like that. They kind of came in and just took over Egypt. And
in addition to the Hyksos, you also have the Greeks and the Romans who took over. So that passage could be referring to them, but what I find interesting is where it's talking about the altar. It says, "In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the country of Egypt, and a pillar to the Lord at its border." So I'm like,
what's a pillar?
Could it? Yeah, what is a pillar? Could it be an obelisk? Maybe. Could it be a pyramid? An obelisk has a pyramid on top of it, you know?
But generally speaking, the objects that are created, even like altar kinds of things, anything, when you're building something to the Lord, it usually has a mountainous kind of either metaphoric shape or intent.
Yes.
You know, so that it's always like it's a high place. I mean, even.
And that's why over and over God got mad at the people for not taking down the high places.
Yeah.
And he would say, so-and-so walked with the Lord, but nevertheless, God was not pleased that he did not tear down the high places.
Yeah.
And I've been reading through Kings, and it's like that phrase is just repeated over and over and over and over because the kings didn't take down the high places, and God was like, no, you're not going up to those high places and sacrificing to anybody else but me. You know, those are my places, you know. And he didn't command them to go up there. He said, you're to go into the temple and sacrifice and offer incense and that kind of stuff.
But even where Jesus was where Jesus was on the cross, it's the hill of the skull, right? It's a high place. Yeah. So, I want to talk about some weird math. I'm ready.
Okay, so we talked about the 8 sides, and that was discovered by a guy named Peter Groves in the 1940s. He was flying by on the equinox, and he noticed that there are the 8 sides to the pyramids. It's perfectly aligned to true north. And its accuracy is 3/60th of a degree, which is 99.94% accurate. And we couldn't even tell how accurate it was until the invention of satellites.
Yeah.
And when they started mapping the Earth, they realized, wow, this is... And the closest building that's ever been built to be the most accurate on Earth is the Paris Observatory, and its accuracy rate is 6/60ths of a percent. It's not really that close. It's half of what the accuracy is.
But okay, but going back to teasers to the entity idea, the way that you could see how the magnitude of the pyramids was not pedestrian. It was celestial.
It was aerial.
It was aerial. You cannot do it from the ground.
No, you
have
can't.
To see it it's almost created for and by something from the sky, from above.
Exactly, like the Nazca lines are that way too. And the other thing too is the Teotihuacan pyramid also has an accuracy very similar to this, and there's a lot of real similarities between the two. And I saw somewhere too that some people think that the big hidden pyramid in is it Bosnia or somewhere, there's a big pyramidical structure there that they're like, there's something connected with that as well. But here's the thing, the Egyptians allegedly didn't have geometry, trigonometry, calculus. They didn't understand pi, phi, or higher math at all. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. So and here's the other thing. None of the other pyramids matched with the accuracy of the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
And so to me, I would say, okay, well, what you're dealing with then is you have a structure, and we're talking about cultural continuity, right?
Yeah.
I think what probably happened is, kind of like at the end of Planet of the Apes when Charlton Heston comes riding onto the beach and he sees the Statue of Liberty buried there. And it's like, okay, another civilization comes along after the flood.
Yeah.
This is the Mitzrayim, the Egypts that's talked about.
Yeah.
They dig out the Sphinx, they dig out the Great Pyramid, and they say, wow, there's something important about this.
Yeah.
And probably, if we look at this Isaiah verse, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's what he's referring to, the Sphinx and the pyramid. And this pyramid, the Sphinx temple, what if, there's nothing there. There's nothing to suggest what was being worshipped at the Sphinx temple. There's nothing to suggest what was being worshipped except an empty sarcophagus.
Yep.
All right, who do we know that's the god of the empty sarcophagus? You know, Jesus.
Yeah.
He's the one that rose from his
Yeah.
tomb. And so if the prophecy from Adam and Eve's time is there's going to be the one that rises up that will crush the head of the serpent,
Yeah.
and he will be resurrected and all that kind of stuff, that could be the thing that gave rise to these other belief systems with Osiris and all this stuff. If they had the kernel of truth at the very beginning and the prophecy that God gave them at the beginning, then it's like, well, maybe they did leave Eden and go and build a pyramid and a temple with a big lion. And what does the lion represent? God has always used the lion as a representation of himself.
Yep.
And so if you put a big lion in front of a temple, in early times you would say, maybe that is a representation of God and early God worship, you know? Also, Göbekli Tepe, as I read somewhere, dates to this time period too.
That whole thing is so interesting that there's a theory that when Noah comes off the ark, the first thing he does is sacrifice. He makes a big altar area.
Yep.
And then because Göbekli Tepe has these. It look, if you were to squint, you go, okay, this could be an area where there's a lot of sacrifices that were done, and all the animals that were sacrificed were listed on the pillars, and it wasn't.
Yep.
It's so interesting that idea that this could be, and from what I understand, it's really that particular theory is really being like shushed. Like, no, like, and
they don't want anybody to think that.
They don't want anybody to come in there and go, this could be,
and
this could validate.
What if Noah had set that place up before the flood, buried it, and then unburied it, after the flood? I don't know. Anything like that is a possibility, The other thing, too, there's been a lot of new developments about the Ark structure that they're in Turkey on Mount Ararat, and a lot of people are doing ground penetrating radar. We need to talk about that at some point, but let's get back to the math. So if you look at the base, put a circle around the base of the pyramid, and you compare it to the height, you get the measurement for pi. If you do the surface area of all the sides divided by the surface area of the base, you get the golden ratio, phi, or the Fibonacci sequence. If you take the position of the pyramid, it's I can't remember, I didn't write it down. There's something about the position of the pyramid to north. Oh, that's what it is. It's 29.9792458 degrees north, which just so happens 299,792,458 is the speed of light. Wow. It's like, okay, and you're just telling me the Egyptians just randomly built this thing?
Right.
I don't buy it. It's so many things. Oh, and here's something. So the Earth is slightly wider because of its rotation than it is tall, okay? And if you do the math, basically the pyramid, when you divide it into the 8 sections that make up the 8 sides, one side is slightly longer than the other, exactly the same ratio as it is as the Earth is. So it's like, how can you have numbers like that? It's 3,022.94 square feet, and the other side is 3,043.547 square feet, and that's a 1 to 43,200 time ratio, the exact dimensions of the Earth for either hemisphere.
So, we marvel at this because it doesn't seem like it's something that humans are capable at any level.
Ever. Ever in the history of time have we been able to do something like this.
Yeah.
And it's not just that I want to say, okay, I understand a guy like Zahi Hawass and where he's coming from. He's Egyptian, and he wants to be proud of his Egyptian heritage and say, my people were so amazing that they created this thing. But guess what? Your people didn't create this thing. I'm sorry. And if they did, you're a Nephilim.
Yeah.
It's just, there's something wrong with you, Zahi. You know? It's like, that's not how that happened. It's some other entity created this, and it's possible that the fallen angels, that was the Watcher's job before they fell.
Well, okay, so let's get into this for a second, because one of the things that we've talked about and what Gary Wayne talks about is the duplication. Whenever there's the duplication of or replication or a copy, what God does, those who are with God amplify what he has done for his glory. Those who are not with God try to replicate and create parallels or alternate forms of what God does to take away from his glory. Almost to create secularism kind of thing. So you look, and God took what was without form and void, and he created, and he made very exact things. He made them work intricately. He made them work all together. And then it's almost like these things were then this alternate form of something whose job was to inform and instruct us of how to live initially, how to live, how to take minerals and make ore that makes gold, that makes silver, that makes iron. We wouldn't know that stuff. You can't just say we just arrived on the planet.
Well, we certainly wouldn't know the dimension. Check this out. So we talked about the 43,200.
Yeah.
It's not just the hemisphere of the Earth.
Yeah.
Also, 432,000 miles just so happens to be the radius of the sun. And you tell me that God didn't plan that out? Why would it be that our equinox is exactly 43,200 seconds, and yet 43,200 miles around the sun? Why is that the same number?
Okay, so look,
or a multiple of it.
So let's get into that. So we have dimension. What is awe-striking is the exact dimensions of things, how things are. I mean, even when Solomon's temple was built, when Noah's Ark was built, whenever anything was, when God gave instructions, however those instructions were given, gave exact dimensions on how they were supposed to be made. Okay, with length and height and all that stuff. It's almost like a God-given understanding that things will work together in his dimension, in his measurement, right? Mm-hmm. He gave us day, he gave us night, he gave us all those things, right? So if you're going to replicate that, then you're going to say, all right, I'm going to create mountains. I'm going to create dimension. I'm going to make works of creation, alternate forms, which reflect a creation, heavenly creation of things, but it creates chaos. It's the chiasmus idea.
That's why I think
you're not coming out of this with God. You're coming out, well, with the exception of what you're talking about with the the lion and that sort of thing.
Right.
Yes. But with these other things where you're just mystified because
and that's why I think the proliferation of other pyramids became a thing.
Yeah.
Because Satan came along and was like, no, we can't have this altar and this perfect, pillar in the heart of Egypt. Yeah. What we need to do is we need to obfuscate this whole thing and come up with our own, and I think that's probably why but then again, some of these pyramids, when you start tracing out the thing, it's almost as if they were all part of one big network, so it's like I don't know what to think about some of that.
A kingdom of earth like that, you're building
That's true.
I mean, look at what
that could be part of the whole Atlantean thing.
Exactly.
Like let's say for a minute that the pyramid does predate the flood, and that Atlantis was destroyed by the flood. Okay, if that's the case, and Atlantis was destroyed because of its hubris, then it was building a kingdom and an edifice to itself.
Yes.
And they started with that nucleus of what was intended for God originally, and he said, oh, wait a minute, no, we're not having this. And that's when, their evil had finally gotten to be so terrible that they caused these horrible wars with each other. That's why I think, like, the Vimanas, I think it's the Mahabharata that talks about what looks to be like a nuclear war. At least Oppenheimer thought it did.
Yeah.
And when he says, I'm Shiva, the destroyer of worlds. And so to me, it's like, okay, well, maybe this great empire that was pre-flood, part of it began maybe with this pyramid and the Sphinx. And then that was not meant to be glorifying them, but then they corrupted it, like Satan tries to corrupt everything, and that became the corruption of it.
Well, okay, so when we see what God has created, and He creates it for life itself, and for it all kind of works together, and not only works together, it works together for life. Like, that's why oxygen, where's our hearts, the blood, all that stuff, it's all kind of working together. But if you
do you realize that both of our wives have made an appearance in this episode?
Oh, they have?
She just came to do laundry, and my wife's on the Egypt pictures.
I didn't know she's there. But what I'm saying here is that, all right, now take a precision creation of that does nothing. Absolutely, but it is precision. It shows dimension. It shows it almost like it's like a low budget version of what God's doing, but it goes nowhere because
I don't like the term that it does nothing, and I like your idea of going sideways and the chiasmus and all that. However, I think that whenever the enemy gets his hand on it, it does destruction is ultimately what it does.
But it demonstrates. But look, I mean, the demonstration of like you said, the dimension of the sun, the speed of light. I don't think that the Watchers can do anything, but they can't create something that doesn't have the excellence of heaven involved.
No, they can't do that.
They were given the instruction of everything that we're supposed to know. So when they're building something, it's all supposed to be something that we're supposed to know.
Yep.
So it is a high information, elitist understanding of what Earth was supposed to be, everything. But it's not for the anthropic principle of life. It's it's dead rock. It's other it's stuff that's it's mountain and stuff. That's really more idolatry than anything, if you think about it.
Well, that's what I say. What I think with a lot of the things that Satan wants to do, or that he tries to do, is he tries to manipulate something good and turn it into something evil. Look at music. Music's a good thing. It makes you happy. It makes you joyful. You spend it. You play music with festivals and things like that with your family and friends.
Yeah.
But music has been turned into this strange perversion. Like, I mean, if you just look at some of the Grammys lately and some of the weird demonic, dance routines and stuff that's going on, it's like it's all being mutated. Alcohol was originally intended. The Bible says wine is to bring gladness, but alcoholism is a horrible thing. Yeah, right. Or take a little wine for the stomach's sake. But yet you got plenty of people that are addicted to drinking, and you can take that further into drugs. Like, drugs are probably meant to heal, and yet they've been, warped into whatever. Because Satan can't create. No. All he can do is mutate.
Yeah.
And try to bring it around to the destruction of people.
Well, go to the Eden event. In the Eden event, it was God and man. And Satan's like, well, let's go over to this tree. And I want you to kind of an obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yep.
The obsessive is an intrusive thought that you cannot control. An image, an understanding, a vision, or whatever it is, that
Yep.
is a repetitive thing that is not of you, but because it's not under your control, you're not volitionally causing it. And if he's putting that obsession there and going, yeah, but look at this thing. Don't look at this.
He'll do it with
stuff.
anything.
Yeah.
Well, and what is a tree other than a natural pillar?
Yeah, exactly.
We're back to the pillar concept.
We are back to the pillar, and then God said, all right, I'm going to take the pillar, and I'm going to negate the pillar by using the pillar to create redemption. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's more. There's a guy named Robert Bauval who was a theorist that found out that there's a connection between Orion's belt and the 3 pyramids on the Giza plateau, and how they all point directly at Orion's belt at a certain time period that I think dates back to about the time period of Khufu, which to me suggests that maybe Khufu took the other pyramids and said, okay, let's build off of this and shoot at Orion. But Orion, the great hunter, if you look at, was it Bullfinch that wrote about the Mazzaroth? Or not Bullfinch, who am I thinking of?
No, Bullfinch is like
Baldwin?
Fables.
Yeah, he was the myths.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guy that wrote about the Mazzaroth talked about how Orion, the great hunter, is actually another image of Christ, but I don't think Khufu was trying to go after Christ, but then we've got have you heard about the I think his name was Joe Parr? Have you heard about him?
No.
He's this guy that he was supposed to have done an experiment with a pyramid shape that was a scale model of the pyramid, and when he started adding energy to it, all of a sudden it started behaving weirdly, and it like generated some sort of a force field, and then it phased out of and then rephased back in his wall. And like, I don't know what to think about this. It's really strange.
I mean, I've heard for years, anytime you create some sort of what do you call it, pyramidal shape, that it has its reaction to energy and reaction to light and reaction to different kinds of things is different from any other shape. And
plants grow better in it, and other weird things like that.
It responds to. I think it even responds to entropy differently. Like it doesn't.
It doesn't. So strange.
It's allowed to. It has an endurance to it that when other things are breaking down, it's not. Something like that. Wait, let me go to one other thing. Let me go to one other thing. Back to the entity idea that these beings came down. They kind of, if especially if the pillar thing underneath that goes like miles down underneath, or kilometers maybe underneath, then that is no way it's human. However, what do we have in Scripture about whenever anything is, when the thing that is really a part of Scripture, whenever anything is built, there has to be a foundation. The foundations of the earth, the foundations of things have to exist first. If these watchers were trained to do that, and then they rebelled, but they're still doing what they're supposed to be doing, whatever they create is going to have foundation.
Yes,
almost
but
a
think about this,
placed on foundation.
What is at the top of an obelisk?
A point.
A little pyramid.
Yeah, a little pyramid, yeah.
What did they just discover underneath the Great Pyramid? Structures that they don't know how far down it goes.
Yeah.
Just because it's buried and we only see the point at the top does not mean that there's not a pillar standing in the heart of Egypt, just like the Bible said.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Easter Island guys. They're those heads.
Those guys. I was thinking about them too.
They were full-fledged bodies and everything once they uncovered them.
So when you've got this thing in the middle of Egypt that
Yeah.
goes descending into the ground
Yeah.
lower than what it is. Not only is it a foundation, like you said, but it still matches what the Bible says about it being a pillar.
Yep.
And I'm not sure where Giza lies in how close it is to the border of modern day Egypt, but I know that that Giza was at one of the borders of ancient Egypt. So it's kind of like, at the time when Isaiah made that prophecy, it's possible that the pyramid was at the border in Egypt. For all I know.
Plus, when, the scripture says that when we are born into a new body, what is put to death is the old man, right? And what's another name for an old man? A Giza.
Yeah. That's true. That's very true. So back to the this Joe Parr guy. He talked about how the power, or I don't want to use the word power. It sounds metaphysical, but I don't know, the electrical impulse or whatever of the pyramid seems to have stronger pull whenever the sun, the earth, and Orion line up every year, and that's between December 12th and December 16th. And what's wild about that is my wife standing on the pyramid there in the picture. Her birthday is December 12th. So is it a weird random connection? I don't think so.
Can't be.
Can't be. It has to be normal.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's something strange. He kind of speculated that maybe the pyramid was a dimensional or time portal. And it's like, okay, well, if there is truth in that, then maybe that's where the Watchers entered, into the world, or how they came in, and maybe that's somehow connected with the Mount Hermon thing. I would like to know the shape of Mount Hermon now. It's like wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah.
Let's see. I think it was Randall Carlson, or maybe it might have been, who's the other guy? Graham Hancock was talking about there's a 20,000 year fossil record, and there's been 16 major cataclysms in that time period, and 12,000 years ago was the Younger Dryas, and also 11,500 years ago was Göbekli Tepe, and that also just so happened to be the same time that it was the last rainy period in the Sahara. And so these two guys, John Anthony West was sort of this, he was kind of a conspiracy theorist, kind of a guy that was really into the metaphysics of the pyramid and all that. And he basically noticed that there was what he thought was water erosion. Yeah. And so he said, is there anybody that I can get that's a geologist to come and look at this? And so they contacted Robert Schoch, who was a geologist at Boston University. He's still a geologist at Boston University, or at least he was recently. And so in 1990, he went to prove that West was wrong. Because he was like, well, if all my Egyptologist colleagues have said that the pyramid was this old, and that's how old it is, then they know their stuff. That must be the way it is. Yeah. So he gets to the Sphinx, and he said it literally took him 30 seconds to look at the enclosure around the Sphinx and say, oh, this was water erosion that caused this. Yeah. And he's not a hack. I mean, this guy's a real geologist. Yeah. But as soon as they announced the Zahi Hawass kicked him out and said you're not allowed to come back to Egypt and study this anymore. It's like that's the kind of stuff that... Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. Can you hear me? Whoops, I knocked something over.
Right. So...
It's the pyramid is messing with your phone.
It's going, not using my, I don't know, my head, my ear whatever, ear device.
Maybe you need to stick your phone under a model of the pyramid.
I think so.
There we go. Yeah, so that was something that I learned. And then here's one last math thing that was really interesting. the edge length of the pyramid is 555 feet, which is 6,666 inches.
Wow.
Isn't that pretty weird?
That's got some stuff.
And the inside circular diameter of the pyramid is 365.24. Guess what the tropical length of the year is? It's exactly 365.242 days.
Again, these are elements of the perfect creation, and that if something had understanding of that but didn't have any other function but to inform, then they couldn't do anything but express that. These are, but it's so funny they're looking at it going, well, how could man do this? Man can't do it. There's no way.
No, we don't have that kind of information today. I am going to go on record that I bet within the next 100 years, there are going to be researchers that find more weird mathematical things about the pyramid that we don't have the technology to understand yet.
Yeah.
But they will within the next 100 years, and they'll say, whoa, that's another weird mystery of the pyramid. I don't think the pyramid's finished giving us strange, bizarre number
I think we're going to find the more that we have information from space, the more because it goes back to me that you're looking down on the creation and go, your perspective on creation, you can't help but react to it if you are one of the the watchers, the council, or anything. That's what you're doing. You're like, Satan, where did you come from? I came from going from the earth back and forth, to and from. He's not the only one. They're all doing that. Why? Because they are giving us information. They're correcting, they're instructing, they're all time, or they're corrupting, or they're disrupting, or they're interrupting.
I think if we go back to our Alberino episode where we talked about his theory about the other planet that was between Mars and the Earth.
Yeah.
I watched the Y-Files this week, and he came out with a new episode about that topic and how this NASA scientist had speculated that there actually was another planet and that Mars was the moon of that planet, and it was right near there somewhere, and that the asteroid belt is made up of fragments of that planet. All of the comets in our solar system are fragments of that planet. And but what's his name? AJ at the Y-Files talked about how he did a whole video, and I watched it before, about how NASA has covered up photos and photoshopped a lot of photos that they present to the public. And Mars, a lot of the Martian photos have been photoshopped, and you can see where they have early images and then they take them down and then they put up a photoshopped image. And the same thing happened with the face on Mars. The same thing happened with the pyramids on Mars, that there used to be an image and then they changed it. And the standard line is, well, we are giving a clearer picture now that we got before. And yet the picture, you can anybody that knows Photoshop knows what to look for and can be like, yeah, well then why is this picture
why'd you put that in there?
Yeah, why has it been Photoshopped? You know? And like some of the things like he shows are like, you can see some of the clone stamp tools that are part of Photoshop. You can see some of the brushes that are part of Photoshop. And it's like all that stuff is popping up on these NASA photographs. And it's like, what are they blurring out, you know, that they don't want us to see? You know, and maybe it's like something... I could go so far as to say maybe they have equipment that they don't want us to know about, and so they're blurring out their own equipment. But when they have, like he showed original pictures alongside of the one that was taken down alongside the new one, and there's no equipment in the picture. It's just something odd and weird, and it's like, well, maybe they don't want people speculating about aliens or whatever. I don't know, but it seems to me that two things are possible in this whole thing. If we're going with a timeline where something was destroyed and then God recreated the earth because life was essentially wiped out, and that was when Adam came along. Well, maybe when this planet blew up, there was life in the universe before that, and then that could explain why maybe we have a longer fossil period than the young earthers like to claim. And maybe the people that lived at that time period, use the word people loosely, the entities that lived in that time period were Elohim. I mean, we don't know what the Elohim's existence was in ancient past, and the Bible doesn't tell us, because the Bible wasn't written for the Elohim.
Nope.
It was written for us to know what we need to know about salvation. And that salvation's through Christ. And the whole story of the Bible, from the very beginning of Adam until the closing in Revelation, is all about the long story of Jesus being the Redeemer that's going to redeem us. And so I feel like when you hear somebody like Ken Ham say, this is critical to salvation. No. It's not. What's critical to salvation is that you put your faith and trust in Jesus and as the Savior, because He saved us from our sins. What's not critical to salvation is whether you get the dating right of Genesis, because you're not taking away from Jesus' claim of divinity or His sacrifice for our sin just because the dates are a little skewed. You're not taking away from original sin even. No. Or the idea that man fell. You're not taking any of that away when you question the time period of this.
Well, that's why I like when Heiser said that the Bible is not a science book. It never it never claims to be, and it's not, because like you said, that's not what it is. So when people are trying to push some kind of scientific truth out of the Bible and say, look, here's the authority, it's an authority, but not an authority of that.
No, and I really like the DNA stuff that the young earthers are doing. I really like how they can show that everybody comes from pretty much a common ancestor or three common ancestors, which would be Noah's sons. Yeah. And that the DNA goes back to around the time period when they say the flood happened. Yeah. But I don't see how they can say that there was a global flood at that time period. The global flood seems to have happened earlier, and if they really want to be literal, then what they're pushing for is a localized flood. Yeah. And I personally don't believe that Noah's flood was localized. No. But the one thing that they talk about is they do a lot of talking about how, the DNA can only go back about 10,000 years. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. If you're going back about 10,000 years, then you're getting real darn close to the Younger Dryas period, because if it's off by maybe a couple thousand years, then they could match up then. Yep. And now you're talking about a DNA showing that we go back to the Younger Dryas, which shows that Noah's flood happened at the Younger Dryas.
Every time you say Younger Dryas,
I'm sounding like Randall. I was the Younger Dryas.
Younger Dryas. Younger Dryas.
Now we're both hoarse.
Now we have to have Josh Scott. He has to.
Okay, hold on. I have something new. You can't hear it.
I can hear that.
That's the JH pitch. JHS pitch tone now. It's time
for the JHS pedal pitch. Today's pitch is the Randall Carlson congestion pedal. It distorts anything you put through it.
And makes it sound like a cocked wah.
Makes it sound like John C. Reilly and what's his name? And Edward, what's his name? Who's Darth Vader?
Why can't I remember? James Earl Jones.
If you take James Earl Jones and John C. Reilly, you get Randall Carlson, and that's what the pedal. It's a deep congestion that just distorts everything senselessly.
Yes, that's it.
So philosophically, yes. Sonically, yes.
Yes. Well, I have basically the pyramid pedal.
Okay, what's that?
And it's basically, it's because that one guy did the experiment and it went out of phase.
Yeah.
You basically have a pedal that increases intensity in its out of phaseness. Like it's changing the phase back and forth, and it
cool.
gradually increases intensity rather than fades intensity.
Ah, I love that. Yeah.
But only on December 12th through the 16th.
Otherwise, you can't use the pedal.
Yeah, there has to be like a calendar built into the pedal.
It'd be funny. You click on it, it doesn't work today.
It just doesn't work. It's
you got
not
a couple
the time.
months.
Yeah.
Your gigs can only happen then.
That's it. I think you need to. This is your assignment for the summer.
My summer assignment.
Is to try to get in touch with Josh Scott and make
I think
him
I know how.
A
we have
fan.
a guitar. There's a guitar center. Anybody who's listening to this, Guitar Center in Danbury, Connecticut. If you go in there, the guy that's working behind the counter looks like an evolutionary aspect of Josh Scott. I even told him he looks like he's on the continuum, like a younger, just slightly younger
version of it.
It's so weird. I walked in there. I was like, "You look like Josh Scott." He goes, "Who's that?" I go, "Have you heard of JHS?"
Somebody Guitar Center doesn't know Josh Scott.
And I go, "Well," I said, "Do you know JHS pedals?" He goes, "Oh yeah." I said, "The guy that made them?" He goes, "Oh yeah." I go, "You look just like him." He goes, "Oh, okay." Like, what was weird is it's almost like he's deflecting. Like, I've been hearing that for years. Don't say it again.
Yeah,
like,
don't say it again. I'm tired of hearing it.
It is wild. Like, his hair is exactly like in his face. Like, That's crazy. Funny. Yeah.
That's hilarious. All right, so that's our JH pitch. We have some stuff to talk about.
Merch.
I have not been faithful to updating the WordPress the last month because I've been working on my Ren Fair Magic book. And, I pitched my idea to Penguin Magic, and they really liked the idea.
Oh.
But I talked it over with my son, and he said, I don't think it's necessarily a good deal, and I don't think you should do it.
Okay.
He said, because basically, I have to print the books myself, I would sign them all, ship the amount that they want.
Yeah.
Then I would get 40% of the deal, and I'm like, and then they get 60%. But here's the problem. By the time they turn around to sell it, they would have to mark it up so high that it's like anybody could just go to Amazon and buy it for half the price that they would have to mark it up for. So it's like, I don't think that's a really good, it just didn't seem like the right kind of a deal.
Okay.
If I could print out like 10,000 of them or something, but they only wanted 25 to start with, and I'm like, that just isn't enough to, and if it was 10,000, there's no way I got the money to print that many out.
Yeah.
So but what I did instead is I sent a copy along with my deck of cards for the Portraits of Glastonbury trick that's in the book to Brian Brushwood from the Modern Rogue show, which I think I've sent you some of their videos before. They're in Austin, and Brian Brushwood has had shows on the Discovery Channel, Scam School and Scam Nation, and where he does, like, he's a fire magician, and he does like other magic tricks and stuff. So, but he was really cool. He's like, well, I'll check it out and I'll get back to you. So hopefully I'll hear from him, and maybe we'll be able to plug the Hidden Citadel on their show at some point. That would be kind of fun. But I've slacked on the WordPress because of that.
And also my thing, I haven't stalled. I keep going off in these other directions for the parafables. I have so many to do. I have four that are done that I'm looking at them and go, I need to fix
thinking.
this.
Take the 4 that are done.
Yeah.
and get the images
pictures
ready,
and get
and
them
we'll
out.
get those rolling.
Yeah.
Because at least if we could get, I think if we shoot for like 6 parafables a year,
Yeah.
that would be, you could do that.
I mean, I have like 40 that are ready the 40 that need to be, that have the bones done, have everything put into place. The other thing is the Brothers Graham, the band that I'm in, we're doing it. Our song is going to drop probably July 1st, around that, and we're gonna have a video. We're gonna have Hidden Citadel.
Nice.
A lot of the stuff we talk about as going through it, because the song is called Never Know, and so you're like,
cool. These are things you don't know about.
Yeah.
I was doing some research for you, and if you just type in how to make AI music videos, elements, there's a lot of videos out there that tell you how you can make for free, little elements that you can add into your video.
Perfect.
With some of these too. So just type that into YouTube and you'll find it. And
cool.
Was Lucy able to get the pictures and everything?
Yeah, thanks.
Good.
Perfect. Yeah.
Good deal.
So
anyway, I've slacked a little bit on the WordPress, but I'm hoping once I'm turning my attention to the next book, which can be our next plug. This is the Encyclopedia of Weird Crap. If you haven't bought it, I'm working on volume 2 right now that I'm trying to get it ready for September, because September is when we launched the Hidden Citadel, and so it's kind of like an anniversary present for us of having the Hidden Citadel out for a year. And so volume 2 should be ready by then, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to have a lot of time to devote to the blog for the rest of the summer. But there's so much in the blog that you could go on there and read it for days. A year. You'll be fine. The other thing too is I got a new T-shirt that I designed, but I didn't get the picture up in time for this episode. But it's a little pet peeve of mine, and it's called "Beware the Masked Moron."
Okay.
And it's got a Zorro cowboy-looking guy on a horse with a little, COVID mask.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know how it is where you're at, but around here there are all of these people that plague the stores with their little COVID masks, and I'm like, you're not even looking. You put signs in your yard like "We follow the science," and it's like, you're not even looking at the science. Your little mask has been proven to be useless against pretty much everything except for pollen. So it's kind of like, if you're wearing your mask because and bad breath, you get to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're still wearing a mask, come on. And so the bottom line is, he's armed with outdated science, and he's trying to save the world, badly. So I thought
it was gonna be about Calvinism.
Oh, man, I need to make a T-shirt about Calvinism, but I live in the South, so I probably wouldn't make it out alive if I had that T-shirt. Calvinism and Freemasonry, and they both seem to go hand in hand down here for some weird reason.
We did a retirement party for one of in a lodge, in a Masonic lodge.
Really?
It was just a gather. It's like their regular. It just looks like a basement of. It looks like just a gathering hall, like of any other. And I'm there, and I'm like, because there's no signs of anything, because it's really just a leisure, man cave. Like, that's all it is. Anyway, one of the guys from the school who was there, he belongs to the lodge. He goes, "You want to see upstairs?" I go, "Yeah." And so I went upstairs, and I saw there was all
of their stuff.
What's funny? He goes. He goes, a lot of people, he gave me the explanation. He goes, a lot of people will say that there's I said, well, it's been aligned with a Satanism kind of thing. And he goes, well, really, it was put in place, he said it was put in place to combat the controlling corruption of the Catholic Church. I
agree with that.
And so so he's describing, but he goes, but if you think about it, religions in general control. He goes, so this is just, it's almost like the components of a religion without the religion. He goes,
Exactly.
but it's interesting because then he starts talking about the initiation that he had to go through, and he had to come in like with almost like nothing but a loincloth on, a bag over his head.
Yep.
And he came in, and there's all these rituals. I was like, yeah, but if it's to combat religion, why are you doing such weird things for initiation?
Yes.
Such routinized, ritualistic,
which
methods,
date back to other religions,
and are put in place that you cannot not do them. Like that.
Yep.
That's where it's a religion. That's where it's like more of a cult. Because if you don't do these things, something's going to happen.
You're not part of their group.
I'm like, look, I saw the whole thing. I was like, wow.
I'll tell you, if you want to see something interesting, the next time you're in Chicago, plan a day trip to Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And go to the Houdini Museum there.
Oh, okay.
It is built inside of a former Mason lodge, and it was Houdini's lodge. And the symbolism built into every detail of the building is like really strange, and a lot of the angles, the black and white checkerboards,
that was there.
all of the different symbolic things that are part of their religion that they don't realize is a religion. And the other thing too is, how high up is this guy? I mean, when you get up the 30,
So, well, locally, he's just a couple of seats from the top. He said next year he's going to be the top of that lodge.
Okay. Yeah. Here's the thing. You can go all the way up to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, and you're just at that point now getting into what they really believe. And so then you have to scale up the other lodges like the Scottish Rite or something like that. Yeah. And it's like that's the highest level Mason has no idea what they actually believe because it's all hidden from them.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like they tell him these things, but once he gets higher up, then they'll be like, oh, well, we told you this, but that was a symbol for this, and now you're getting to know the real thing. And
I got that
they
feeling
get into,
too.
They get higher up into Hermes Trismegistus and all of the teachings of the alchemy and all of that kind of stuff, and it's like, you know, when it all comes down to it, it really basically boils down to, let's create a man-made religion that goes against Christianity.
Yeah.
And we'll give you all these secrets and fun things, the whole Dan Brown, mystery kind of stuff that's going to keep you interested and intrigued, but ultimately it's just going to put Jesus as, just one of many of the other gods and many of the other ways to God, and it's like, that's not how it works. Jesus is preeminent, and he is the only way to God. It's what he said. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me. He's the gate, It's like, these are things that, they're not they're symbols, but they're not mysteries, They're just, he's plain up trying to tell you as straight up as he can, this is what the truth is.
Yeah.
Where Jesus didn't hide things, but why do you have to hide things if you're in your organization?
Right.
And I would argue that the Catholic Church is another mystery religion in a lot of ways. And it's not, they have so many things that they've obfuscated too over the years. And it's like they're just another version. And I imagine somewhere up the line, when you get way up the chain, you're going to see a unification of the Catholic Church and the Masonic orders. Yeah. And probably what happens is once you get up to that height, that's when we get into this whole concept of Islam, Mormonism, the Masons, all of this stuff unites, probably with the Catholic Church. That's the one world order, and then that's what gives you the beast and the false prophet and the Antichrist, all is kind of a little mixture of all those organizations coming together. And they're already together, they just don't know that they're together.
That's true. Because they all have the same pattern, all the same thought. It's all, So.
Yeah. We should do a whole episode on that. Well, anyway, those are our t-shirts. You got our books. Go to the WordPress, and is there anything we forgot?
No,
I don't think so.
Look for the Hidden Citadel. Watch for us every week. Subscribe.
All right, we will see you next time. Hang in there.
Because night is coming. Night is coming.
The watchman replies, morning is coming, but night will soon return.